transfer and why that's important to you and your beer. So first, if you want to follow along on social media, SoCal Beer Guy is my handle, so look out for me there. Today we're talking about closed transfer and kind of versus racking cane. Why is it better? Haven't we been doing this for a while? So the old school racking cane, you'd have your bucket, you'd pop open that lid, you put that racking cane in there and start pumping. Problem with that is you've now exposed all that beer, especially if you're dealing with, say, a New England IPA, one of the more delicate styles. You introduce a whole lot of oxygen, and you can watch that New England IPA go from a beautiful golden color, opaque straw, whatever you want to call it, to a muddled brown mess within just a few days. So basically what a closed transfer is what we're doing is taking our beer from our fermenter, whether that's a bucket, whether that's a conical, whether that, whatever that happens to be, and we're going to suck or push the beer out with CO2. That way we're not replacing the headspace that's going to be growing as the beer transfers with oxygen, but rather, CO2, which isn't going to hurt anything. So first things up, sanitization is always, always be sure to clear your port. Go ahead, look in there with a flashlight. If it's been out in the garage for a while, you want to make sure nothing's taking up residency in there. I do kind of miss the old brew buckets though. These conicals, although neat and they're pretty and everyone thinks they're, cool, kind of more a pain in the ass than what they are. So there's our port. Next thing is our tube. So in the case of this one, we've actually got a little filter on here, and that's basically to get rid of hot particles. I used to do this with a mesh bag on the end of my siphon. Kind of works the same way on New England IPAs. I'd almost prefer two of these, one with a more coarse filter, and then one with a more fine filter first. But right now it's currently full of sanitizer. I like doing that. That way I know that once I push that out with some CO2 here, that this is going to be 100% clear. So I've kind of made up, a bunch of pre-made harnesses and stuff. This is just a little adapter carbonator cap. You can get these things a heck of a lot cheaper online. They're made out of stainless and come with extra O-rings than you can, that plastic goofy blue thing that people sell. So I've got my regulator set up over here to a real low PSI. But basically all I'm going to do is kind of put these together. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but I'm essentially just going to flush this device with CO2 prior to affixing it to there. That way, when I first open this up and start pushing beer, we're not going to introduce any oxygen. And go ahead and just kind of push all that out. And unfortunately my filter's a bit opaque. I left it in powder brewery wash overnight. Don't do that. So now that's all clean. We'll affix that here. I know this isn't 100% oxygen free, but I know it's damn near close. And I also keep a clamp on here just so we don't blow this thing off mid-transfer. Kind of get that directionally pointed down. That way we get rid of the oxygen. And I'll leave this off for now, just so we can actually fill this line full of beer prior to pushing it in. Typically what I use on the keg, so this keg has actually been purged with CO2, and by that I don't just mean hooking CO2 up to it for a while. I basically part of my clean process is clean it, obviously, and then fill it full of Star San, and now push said Star San out of here with CO2 to another keg or back to my bucket that I store it in. And basically what that does is ensure that 100% of this keg is full of CO2 and nothing more. Typically what I'll do is I'll keep just an extra one of these around, put it on the import, and just prior to starting, give it a little purge. You can kind of hear it there. However, someone recently told me about hooking up my spunding valve for that. So this is going to be a first attempt at that. We'll see if it works. My only concern is the lowest setting on the spunding valve looks like 10, but if I back it out past that, it should be 0, hopefully. Basically, I don't want to create more than a few pounds of pressure. These things are only rated at a couple PSI, they've got some safety measures for that, but you know, you don't want to over pressurize, say, a glass carboy or anything. So on that note too, if you do run into an overpressure situation, disconnect your gas rather than trying to turn off the tank, because when you turn off the tank, regulators actually spike. So you can go from 3 psi to 10 psi in a split second prior to it actually turning off the gas. So just be aware of that. Today we're going to hook up this same little device with the hose, and you can't really hear it, but it's running. I like to kind of just drape that up here. What I'm doing now is I'm going to remove this little Play-Doh doohickey, and this tube just happens to fit perfectly in this little T-valve. So right now this tank is being pressurized at maybe 1-2 psi, but it's, like I said, CO2 only. It does have a, you can kind of hear it there, it does have a PRV, pressure relief valve. And I kind of listen to that. I listen to the whole system just to make sure I'm not over pressurizing anything. So now that that's happened, we can go ahead and actually open up our port here. Ideally, you want that, you know, your dip tube in an upward position, and then we'll drag it down right till we start seeing some material, and then we'll back it off. That way we can ensure that we're getting as much beer out of here as possible. So take the pressure off. Always be sure to align these guys. Ugh. Another pain in the ass part. Oh, there we go. Alright, so you can see a little beer's flowing. I kind of like to purge it a little bit, get that beer right up next to there. Here's our out port. So that means our dip tube's all the way at the bottom. And what I'll do here is spray my post, spray here, and I'm going to hook up with this just because I know this is how I normally do it. Get the pressure out of the keg. The last thing you want to do is have a keg full of CO2, hook this up, and blow this stuff all apart. So, yep, we're clear there. And we should be transferring now. I can see fluid moving here. Not at a super fast clip, but that's good. We can now play with our pressures a little bit, maybe 1 psi up. And what you want to do too is watch your filter. Basically, inside the center of the filter is where the fluid comes in, so it goes through the center and then out. So you can kind of see some hop material fumbling around in there. If you do start seeing a lot of, or actually like a vacuum, you start seeing that the tank is pulling more than, sorry, it's glycol chiller kicking on. We'll probably turn that off once we clear this first keg. We just want to make sure that, you know, your filter's not clogged with a ton of hot material. You can see these lines are getting nice and chilly. We're down around, I think, 7 centigrade. These filters can be found on Amazon. They're super cheap. There's like a real brand, quote unquote, and then there's the knockoff brand. I go knockoff brand, I'm kind of cheap, by the way. That applies to this stuff too, because I found this off Craigslist for $300. So there is, you know, the optional, you know, thing you could do is put a scale under it, and you can actually say, like, you know, what's a corny keg weigh? I think it's like 47 pounds or something. That way you know when to stop. Otherwise, you know, you're kind of just waiting for the post to start either pissing fluid or something, and that means your keg's probably too full anyway. Luckily this beer's super cold, so we'll be able to start seeing it show up down here. But yeah, so this is closed transfer, all said and done. There's a lot of ways you can do this on big mouth bubblers, you know, the ones with the orange top, or the, you know, the little orange top you can get for a carboy. That allows you to pressurize that system. People will affix the same kind of O2 connection or CO2 connection like that to those, and then you can pressurize your carboy. Obviously, it being glass, you want to stay very low on the pressure. Don't force things. If the beer's not transferring, chances are you got a clog somewhere. You know, whether your pickup tube is clogged, something, you know, your keg's not venting, you know, maybe you got sidetracked. But I like to keep an eye on this stuff. Doing it this way, I kind of just put my finger over the top of this guy every once in a while and just, you know, make sure that I am getting, you know, fluid moving. If you can see down here, it's probably out of camera, but we can start seeing that condensation on the keg come up. Now that we're running, I know this is working, let's try this spunding valve. So this is something I kind of assembled off a DIY, and I did it so I could pressurize kegs for Brett ferments. Oh, so there we go. So we're definitely going. Let's try a few psi. I think this needle might be, or this gauge is probably too high pressure for the low pressure 1 to 2 psi that we're using here, but if I back it off, I can definitely hear that we're bleeding pressure, so it's kind of a neat way of doing things. I feel like if you were going off a unit tank or something like that, to which was already carved beer, this would be super cool, because now you can, transfer at say 20 psi, and this thing's going to blow off at 20 psi, and you're not just going to end up with a foamy mess. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Limiting oxygen exposure by pumping in CO2, making sure that everything's sealed. And here, there, we're definitely getting some pressure. And being a New England IPA like the style is, I mean, you've put in so much time and effort, not to get too high a bitterness, getting your, chloride to sulfite ratios right, getting that, grist figured out with, your torrefied wheat, your flaked oats and all that, having a brew day where you don't get a stuck mash, so putting plenty of rice hulls in there, adding a damn near pound of hops. And the worst, and now you baby this thing, you make sure that yeast is happy, fermenting, everything's great. And this is where it can all go wrong. So, making sure that you're making this transfer without any oxygen is, kind of the final step to ensure that, you've got a bright yellow beer at the end. So that's about all I got. If anyone's got any suggestions or more, tips and tricks how to do this, love to hear them. I think everyone else would. So thanks for tuning in. Cheers.